Welcome back to another episode of Undialed. My name is Clayton Lindley, and I'm going to be giving you some tips, some tricks into helping your content get better, whether that's for Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. So these are some of the things that I've used for years that have really helped me when it comes to filming and knowing how a camera works. These are also the basic fundamentals that are used by filmmakers for movies, commercials, and everything that you see on the internet. What's great about filmmaking is that there's no right or wrong way to do anything. It really depends on the perspective that you're trying to show through the camera. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, so if you do want to go more in the depth of everything further, you can. But before anything, you need to understand how a camera works. So the first thing we're going to learn about camera settings is shutter speed. But basically what shutter speed does is it controls how much light goes into your camera per second. Something that's amazing about shutter speed is you can use it to stylize your videos. If you're filming at 30 frames per second and you set it to 10, it increases the motion blur. Then if you set it to, let's say, 8,000 or 5,000, it makes it very crispy so it doesn't have any motion blur. You know, just walking. Now I've set the shutter speed up to 8,000. Everything is super crispy. It really gives it a stop motion-y look. So a really big perk is that you can capture a frame out of this and it'd be super crispy.
You better clean your room, Buster.
I'm not going to. What are you gonna do about it, Mom?
You will.
So now that you've seen what shutter speed can do, I'm gonna give you the rule of thumb. Best rule of thumb is to always double the amount of frames per second that you're filming on. So for example, right now I'm filming at 30 frames per second, but I have it set at 60. If I'm filming at 24 frames per second, you want it to be technically 48, but your typical camera isn't gonna go to 48, so the closest is 50. And then if you're filming at 60 frames per second, obviously you wanna go to 120 or the closest one to that. If you're filming at 120 frames per second, crank that thing up to 250 or 300. The reason why it's a good rule of thumb is because it gives it a very natural motion blur, right? It's not too much, it's not too little, it's the perfect amount. Now moving on to aperture. What it does is it controls how much light hits your sensor in your camera, otherwise known as f-stop because it is the focal stop of the lens. So basically what happens is there's a metal claw type of thing. It opens really big or it closes all the way. When it's all the way open, that means it's letting the most amount of light in, and then when it's closed, that means it's letting the least amount in. So something that makes aperture so important is that it actually controls the depth of field. I'm in focus, but everything behind me is out of focus. And that's because my lens is as wide open as it possibly can be, which is 2.0. Some lenses can go lower, some lenses can go higher. It really differentiates between the lenses. So now my lens is set at f16, which is almost the highest that my lens can go in aperture. Everything behind me and myself is completely in focus. If you're at home getting frustrated that you're not getting the depth of field that you're envisioning, it honestly depends on the sensor that you're using. For example, an iPhone is gonna have a much smaller sensor, so you're not really gonna get any depth of field. But a sensor in a DSLR, like the one I'm using right now, that has a bigger sensor, is gonna give you a more narrow depth of field. Now moving on to ISO. This is very straightforward, and basically what it does controls how sensitive your sensor is to light. The higher the number, the brighter everything's gonna be. The lower the number, the darker everything's gonna be. So while ISO is great to use and very beneficial, there are some downsides. So if you can tell, this is a well-lit room, so everything is super crispy and there's no grain or noise, but when you turn the lights off. So now with the lights off, you can see that everything is almost pixelated. What that is the grain or the noise from the ISO being cranked up so high. Because what ISO really is artificial light. So now that you kind of get the idea, now you can start playing with it yourself. A little pointer I would like to give is adjust your shutter speed first and then your aperture, and then afterwards use ISO to kind of level everything out to give it the color that you want, while also trying to keep the ISO low because you don't want everything to look way too grainy. You still want everything to be really crisp and clear, but not too dark and not too bright. So now for you phone filmers, everyone that's using iPhones and Androids to film all their content with. The one thing I will say that you need to pay attention to is that shutter speed, aperture, and ISO does matter on a phone because it's all built in and it's all automatic. Cameras can do it as well, but phones do it consistently. You can't really go in and adjust everything. So the most important thing about filming with a phone is making sure that everything is well lit. If you've noticed that you filmed at night probably, or you filmed a Snapchat, everything's really, really grainy and noisy. And the reason is because the ISO is being cranked up way too much. So if you want quality content on your phone, always make sure that you're filming during the day or just a well-lit room. So now moving on to perspectives and angles. This is the thing that's gonna make or break your Instagram videos, your TikTok videos, your YouTube videos, all about how you film it. Everyone has their own style. There's not really a right or wrong way to do it. It's all about how you see things. Because I always get asked, how do I get good angles? How do I know the right thing to film? And it's really up to you. You wanna have your own perspective of things. You wanna have your own style of filming, trying things you don't like. And there's not a right or wrong way to do it, but you really want to take the time to find out what you think looks the best. Perspective is everything. As of right now, you have no idea what I'm standing next to. One of the biggest rules in filming is that you never want to film someone up next to a wall. One, it's boring and it doesn't show any depth. Moving your camera angle a little bit can make your boring shot interesting. So the first filming technique is the low shot. Establishes the power of the character or the object. So it's really showing that they're big, they're mighty, they're strong, they're looking down at you. So if you're really trying to show that something's big and bad, low shot is the way to go for you. Eye level. Eye level is what we're having right now. It seems like we're having a conversation, right? It makes it very personal. It seems like we're on the same level, you know? I'm not above you, I'm not below you. The high shot is the exact opposite of the low shot. It's just showing that person as a lack of power. Now for the bird's eye view shot. And this is what you've seen drone footage, you see it all the time. And normally you film these type of things at a 40-degree angle. You don't want to film straight down because then you don't get a sense of depth and where you're at. But if it's at a 40-degree angle, you see the horizon, you see trees, you see hills, you see buildings, puts everything into perspective and makes it a little bit more dramatic. All right, so I'm going to talk about lighting and audio very, very briefly because lighting and audio will be the make or break of your video. I think audio is half of your content, right? If you have terrible audio, the video is not going to be what you want it to be. Really focus on your audio, whether that's sound effects to make everything a little bit more dramatic. If you want to punch someone in the face, you add a punch effect, or there's an explosion and you do like a balloon pop or something for like humor. There's so many things you can do and there's so much to it. And just like everything else, it takes practice. It really comes down to what you like. Lighting is just so important. Right now I have this main light that is on the subject, which is myself, and it's at a 45-degree angle, and it kind of just, you know, it's showing the contours of my face, it's making everything pop. But if I have the light below me, it looks kind of creepy. I look like Frankenstein, right? So when you're filming anything, always make sure your lighting is good. Those are just two very basic examples of things you can do with lighting. There's millions of ways that you can do lighting. I'll have some links in the description of some of my favorite lighting videos, so if you really want to go down the rabbit hole of learning different ways of doing lighting and really understanding it, you can. Now, zooming. If you have a lens that can do this, or a phone that can zoom in, here you go. So these are just slang words. I don't know if they're actually the correct terminology, but this is what I'm going to use. You can correct me in the comments below, whatever you want to do. First one is cinematic. This is the pan shots. This is like very subtle and very simple shots that look really, really good. What you're doing is adding an action to a very simple shot. So rather than it being a standard clip like this, and it just sitting there doing nothing, you add an action to it. So now for the sports shot, or the action shot. And that's basically what you see in scooter videos, skate videos, bike videos. You're standing in one position and you're following that person and keeping them in frame while they're moving. That also is when shutter speed comes into play, is that you want to have a higher shutter while they're moving quickly. The last and final one is the hype shot, or a high energy shot. Unlike a cinematic shot where you're panning and making everything seem very calm and majestic, high energy shot makes it hype. Makes you feel how much more energy there is. Woo! So what this shot is really good for is music videos, or a very high intensity shot, maybe someone's fighting. You really want to use certain zoom techniques to match the energy of the environment you're filming in. I hope this really helped. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If I missed anything, please leave it in the comments down below. I will be responding to them as much as I can. I'll also be making an editing video soon. So if you have any questions about editing and things that you want to know to help your editing skills get better, ask them away and I'll answer them in that video. Make sure you go to Undialed.co. We got $5 shirts. And yeah, I said it, $5 shirts. Also make sure you get your S1 helmets. Keep your brain safe out there while you're at the skate parks going hard. And we'll see you in the next video. Peace.